Download this code and get free GPT-4o from codegive.com, link in the description below. Centering an element using position, absolute can be achieved in various ways, but one of the most common and effective methods is to use a combination of CSS properties, including top, left, transform, and translate. Here's a step-by-step tutorial on how to do it. Step 1, set up your HTML. First, create a simple HTML structure. For this example, we'll center a div element inside a container. Step 2, add CSS styles. Next, add the CSS to position the container and center the element. Save this in a file named styles.css. Explanation of the CSS properties. 1. Position, relative, on the container. This establishes a new positioning context, allowing the absolutely positioned child element to be positioned relative to the container. 2. Position, absolute, on the centered element. This allows the element to be positioned anywhere inside the container based on the top and left properties. 3. Top, 50%, and left, 50%. These properties move the top left corner of the centered element to the center of the container. 4. Transform, translate, -50%, -50%. This is crucial for centering. It moves the element back by half of its own width and height, centering it perfectly in the middle of the container. Step 3, view the result. Open the HTML file in a web browser to see the result. You should see a container with a blue box that says I'm centered, perfectly in the middle of the container. Example output. The output will look something like this. A light gray box, the container, will fill most of the viewport. A blue box, the centered element, will be perfectly centered both vertically and horizontally within the container. Conclusion. Using position, absolute along with transform is a flexible and modern way to center elements in CSS. This method works well for both fixed size and responsive elements, making it a go-to solution for many web development scenarios. Centering an element using CSS with position, absolute is a common task in web design. This approach allows you to position an element relative to its nearest positioned ancestor, an ancestor that has a position property other than static. Here's how to do it step by step. Step-by-step tutorial. 1. HTML structure, create a parent element and the child element that you want to center. 2. CSS styles, use CSS to style the parent and child elements, and apply the centering technique. HTML example. Here's a simple HTML structure. CSS example. Now, let's add CSS to center the element. Save the following CSS in a file named styles.css. Explanation of the CSS. Container. Position, relative, this makes the container a positioned ancestor, which means any absolutely positioned child will be positioned relative to this container. Width, 100%, and height, 100%, these ensure that the container takes the full dimensions of the viewport. Centered element. Position, absolute, this removes the element from the normal document flow and positions it relative to the nearest positioned ancestor, the container. Top, 50%, and left, 50%, this positions the top left corner of the element at the center point of the container. Transform, translate, -50%, -50%, this moves the element back by half of its own width and height, effectively centering it. Additional styles, background color, padding, border radius, and shadow, enhance the visual appearance. ##### result. When you open the HTML file in a browser, you should see a blue box with the text-centered content perfectly in the center of the viewport. #### conclusion. Using position, absolute in combination with the transform property is a powerful technique for centering elements on the page. This method is versatile and can be adapted for various layouts by modifying the parent container's size and positioning.